You've seen the pitch. Some guy on your screen says you don't need millions, you don't need a portfolio of rentals, you just need one property. Buy one house, collect the rent, and retire. He'll flash a number at you, something like $2,500 a month, and say there it is. That's your retirement, paid for by a single asset while you sleep. I want to tell you about a guy I'll call Doug who believed that pitch. Doug is 58. He bought one rental house and decided it was going to be his retirement plan. On paper, it looked beautiful. The rent was $2,500 a month, so in his head, Doug was retired. Then the first year happened. The property taxes came. The insurance came. The tenant moved out and the place sat empty for 2 months while Doug paid the bills on it himself. The water heater died, then the air conditioner. By the time Doug added up what actually landed in his pocket, it was less than half of what the pitch promised, and he'd spent more weekends than he wanted to count dealing with it. Here's the thing. Doug wasn't dumb, and the idea wasn't crazy. One property really can be part of a retirement. But the slogan, "one property is all you need," hides 3 things the people selling it never put on the screen. So today, I'm going to run the honest numbers, the ones the gurus skip, and show you exactly when one property actually works and when it's a trap. Not to talk you out of it, to make sure that if you do it with your eyes open. I'm Mike. I'm a regular guy who reached financial freedom on an ordinary income by running the real numbers instead of the pretty ones somebody's trying to sell me. This channel is about real financial education for normal people, the kind without the hype or the guru posing in front of a rented Lambo. Just the math, explained the way somebody should have explained it to you years ago. If that sounds good, hit subscribe. Let me be fair before I'm tough. I'm not anti-real estate. A good rental property can absolutely be a piece of a strong retirement. But all you need is doing a lot of lifting in that sentence, and 3 things are hiding behind it. The first is the difference between what the rent says and what you actually keep. The second is what happens when you bet your whole retirement on a single thing. And the third is the quiet truth that this so-called passive income is actually a job. Let's take them one at a time. Part 1. The rent is not your Einkommen. The first trick is the simplest, and almost every pitch does it. They quote you the gross rent, the big number, $2,500 a month, and your brain hears $2,500 of retirement income. But the rent is the sticker price, not what lands in your pocket, and the gap between those two is enormous. Real estate investors, the actual ones who do this for a living, have a rule of thumb for this, and it's been around forever. It's called the 50% rule. It says that over the long run, about half of your gross rent gets eaten up by the costs of owning the place before you've paid a single dollar of mortgage. Half. And when you see the list of what's in that half, it makes sense. There's property taxes, insurance, repairs and maintenance, a property manager to handle the day-to-day, and the months it sits empty between tenants. Then there's the big one people always forget, the reserve you have to set aside for the expensive stuff that eventually breaks. Like the roof, the heating and cooling system, or the water heater. A new roof can run you well over $10,000. And a new heating and air system about the same, and those don't wait for a convenient year. They come out of the rent whether you budgeted for them or not. So run Doug's house through it. $2,500 a month is $30,000 a year in gross rent. Cut that in half for the real costs of owning, and Doug isn't living on $30,000. He's living on about $15,000. $1,250 a month. That's the honest number, and it's the number the pitch never shows you, because $1,250 doesn't sell a course. Now here's where today's market makes it even harder. There's a second rule investors use to spot a good deal, called the 1% rule. It says a rental is worth a look if the monthly rent is at least 1% of what you paid for the house. So a $400,000 house should rent for about $4,000 a month to be a strong deal. Now look at reality in 2026. A $400,000 house in most of the country rents for something like $2,500 a month, not $4,000. That's about 0.6%. The deals that made this strategy famous, the ones from 10 or 15 years ago, barely exist anymore because home prices ran way ahead of rents. A lot of these gurus are selling you a 2010 playbook in a 2026 market. And here's the comparison that should really reset your thinking. Doug's paid-off house throws off about $15,000 a year in real net income. There's a well-known guideline that you can safely pull about 4% a year from an investment portfolio. Run it backwards. And to generate that same $15,000 a year, you'd need roughly $375,000 sitting in a simple index fund. So Doug's rental, the one the pitch called a magic retirement machine, is doing about the same income job as $375,000 in a boring index fund. Except the index fund never texts him at 2 a.m. about a leak. One property isn't a shortcut around needing real money. It's just a $375,000 asset doing a $375,000 asset's job with a lot more headaches attached. Part 2. Everything riding on one roof. The second hidden thing is buried in the most innocent word in the whole slogan. One property. Because the flip side of you only need one is that your entire retirement is now riding on a single asset. A single tenant, a single roof, and a single neighborhood. And concentration like that is a kind of risk most people never think about until it bites them. Let me show you the difference with something simple. Picture a basket. If you own an index fund, you own tiny slices of around 500 different companies. If one of them goes bankrupt tomorrow, you barely feel it, because it was one slice out of 500. Your eggs are spread across the whole basket. Now picture your one rental. It's not 500 eggs. It's one egg, and you're carrying it in one hand. And that one egg has a nasty feature the pitch never mentions, which is that the income is all or nothing. When your tenant moves out, your income from that property doesn't drop a little. It drops to zero. There's no such thing as a property that's 90% rented. It's full or it's empty. And empty happens. Right now, across the country, about 7% of rental units sit vacant at any given time. For your one property, a perfectly normal 2-month gap between tenants is a 17% pay cut for the whole year. And here's the cruel part. The bills don't stop when the rent does. The taxes, the insurance, the upkeep, and the mortgage if you have one, all keep coming. Straight out of your own pocket, while the place sits dark. On Doug's house, a 2-month vacancy isn't just $5,000 of rent he never collects. It's also 2 months of taxes, insurance, and upkeep he now pays, with nothing coming in behind it. One ordinary turnover can quietly erase a big slice of the whole year's profit before he's even handed the keys to the next tenant. Then there's the surprise bill. I mentioned the roof and the air system. One of those landing in a single year can wipe out a year or even 2 of the property's entire net income in one afternoon. A diversified portfolio of stocks does not call you up and hand you a surprise $15,000 repair. Your one property will, eventually, on its own schedule. And the deepest version of this risk is location. Your one property is a bet on one neighborhood and one local economy. If the big employer in that town packs up and leaves, watch what happens all at once. The value of your house drops. The rent you can charge drops right along with it, and suddenly you can't even find a tenant, all in the same stretch. Because they were never 3 separate things. They were always the same single bet. So if you do own one property, the rule has to be that it's one leg of the stool, never the whole stool, and you keep a real cash reserve behind it. Enough to cover months of empty and a big repair so that one bad break doesn't take down your whole retirement. The people who get wrecked are the ones who heard all you need is one and made it the entire plan. Part 3. That's not passive and calm. It's a job. The third hidden thing is the one I find the most dishonest in the whole pitch, because it's right there in the magic words they always use. Passive income. They make it sound like the money floats into your account while you nap in a hammock. Owning a rental is not passive. It is a part-time job, and sometimes a stressful one. Think about what the job actually is. You have to find tenants and screen them and pick wrong, and you've got a nightmare living in your asset. You have to fix what breaks or pay someone to. You chase the rent when it's late. You take the call when a pipe bursts at 2 in the morning because you're the landlord. And the tenant doesn't care that you're retired. You manage the turnover and the cleaning and the listing every time someone leaves. That's not income that shows up while you sleep. That's a job that occasionally lets you sleep. And here's the question nobody selling this wants you to sit with. Maybe you're fine doing all that at 58. Are you going to want to do it at 75? At 80? Crawl into the attic, vet a stranger's rental application, take the midnight plumbing call? Retirement is supposed to be the part of life where you finally stop having a job. This strategy, sold as freedom, can quietly hand you a job for the rest of your life. So you really have three honest choices here, and you should pick one on purpose instead of stumbling into it like Doug did. Choice 1. You do the work yourself. That's fine if you genuinely enjoy it, but be honest about what it is. It's not passive income, it's self-employment, and you're a landlord who isn't counting his own hours. Choice 2. You hire a property manager so it actually becomes hands-off. Here's the part most people get backwards, though. That 50% rule I used earlier to get Doug down to about $15,000 a year already assumes he's paying a manager. So 15,000 is the hands-off number. The only way Doug nets more than that is to fire the manager and do every bit of the work himself, which might bump him from 15,000 up to around 18,000 a year. So look at the real trade. Pay the manager and net about 15,000 while you actually relax, or pocket about 18,000 and personally become the leasing agent, the repairman, and the 2 a.m. plumber. Doug would be giving up all those weekends and phone calls for about 3,000 extra dollars a year. That's not passive income. That's a part-time job that pays roughly 3,000 a year. Choice 3, you decide not to lean your retirement on this at all. You can still own a property if you want one, but you build your real income on something that doesn't need you. And you let the rental be a bonus instead of the foundation. And do you see the trap those choices form together? The only way to nudge the numbers up is to do the labor yourself. The only way to make it truly hands-off is to pay the manager and accept the lower number. With a single rental, you can have slightly better income or a hands-off retirement. It's genuinely hard to have both, and either way you're a long way from the easy money in the pitch. Part 4. So when does one property actually work? Now I promised I'd be fair, so let me tell you when this genuinely does work, because it can. The honest version just looks nothing like the slogan. One property works as a retirement piece when a few things are all true at once. It's paid off, or close to it, by the time you retire, so no mortgage is eating into that thin cash flow. You bought it right in the first place, at a price where the rent actually makes sense, not a deal where you're collecting 0.6% and praying. You have other income too, your Social Security and your investments. So the property is one leg holding up the stool instead of the whole thing balancing on it. You keep a real reserve of cash behind it for the empty months and the broken roof. And you've decided, honestly, that you either enjoy being a landlord or you've run the numbers with the property manager's fee included, and it still holds up. When all of that is true, a rental can be a wonderful, inflation-resistant piece of a retirement. And it becomes a trap when the opposite is true, when it's the entire plan with nothing behind it, loaded with debt. Banking on the price always climbing and leaning on the guru's favorite move of refinancing and pulling the equity out, which works right up until the market turns and leaves you owing more than the place earns. That's also the version where you signed up believing it was passive and only later found out it was a job. So here's the real reframe. One property is all you need to retire is a slogan built to sell you something. The honest version is longer and less exciting. One paid-off, well-bought property can be a solid leg of a diversified retirement. As long as you respect the real costs, the all-or-nothing risk of owning just one, and the fact that it's work. That sentence will never go viral. But it's the one that keeps you out of Doug's first year. Let me leave you back with Doug. The pitch sold Doug a $2,500 a month retirement machine that ran itself. What Doug actually bought was a roughly $15,000 a year asset, with all his eggs in one basket. That came with a part-time job he didn't know he was signing up for. None of that makes it worthless. Doug's house can still be a good leg of his retirement. It just was never the whole thing, and it was never the thing the slogan promised. The day Doug stopped believing the slogan and started running the real numbers was the day he could finally build a plan that actually worked. So here's your homework if you're even thinking about this. Take whatever rent number has you excited and cut it in half. because that's closer to what you'll really keep. Then ask yourself one cold question. What happens to me in the month the property sits empty and the bills still come? And then ask the one that matters most. Do I actually want this job when I'm 75? If you've got honest answers to those three, you're already miles ahead of the people buying the dream. Drop a comment and tell me, were you sold the one property dream and did the real numbers match the pitch? Because I'd love to hear how it actually played out for you. I read every comment I can. And if you want me to walk through how to build retirement income that genuinely doesn't need you, the kind you don't have to manage or repair or chase, hit subscribe because that's the next video. I'm Mike. I'll see you in the next one.